She cheated, kicked me out without divorce papers, and moved in her criminal lover, but when the FBI called, I gave them everything and watched her world burn. She smirked and said, "No divorce papers needed, just leave." That was the moment I knew I wasn't dealing with the woman I married. When the FBI called her the next morning, well, let's just say karma showed up right on time. I stood in the doorway, suitcase handle gripped in one hand, heart clenched in the other. Her voice still echoed through the halls, sharp, smug, cold. No divorce papers needed, just leave. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She smirked, like it was all some twisted game she had already won. Her name was Jessica. We had been married for 18 years of laughter, struggles, raising our son Tyler, late-night conversations about dreams and fears, all of it now shredded like junk mail. She stood there, arms folded, hip cocked, watching as her new boyfriend, Chad, a slick-haired, cologne-drenched punk, carried in his second duffel bag, like he was moving into a damn frat house. I didn't say a word. I didn't shout or throw anything. I simply nodded. That's when I saw the glint in her eyes, like she wanted a reaction, wanted me to break. But she wasn't going to get it. I zipped the bag, clicked it shut, and walked out the door like I was going to the store. She didn't know who she was playing with. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, engine off, just staring at the dashboard. My wedding ring was still on my finger, the indentation beneath it already starting to ache. The emotional weight didn't hit all at once. It came in small waves, the flicker of memories like ghost echoes, her laugh, her scent, the time she held my hand while I was laid up in the hospital and told me I was her whole world. Lies. All of it. The first real gut punch was seeing Chad's toothbrush already in the bathroom. That meant it wasn't a one-night mistake. This was planned, coordinated. She didn't just fall into someone's arms. She invited him in, replaced me like a piece of old furniture. And that smirk, that fucking smirk. I was halfway to my buddy Matt's place when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something made me swipe the screen. "This is Agent Lauren Grant with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Is this Mr. Nathan Cole?" My grip tightened on the wheel. "Speaking. We've been monitoring some activity involving your residence, and we need to ask a few questions. Can you confirm if a man named Chad R. Whitaker is currently staying at your home?" I froze. "Yes. He moved in today." A beat of silence, then she said, "You may want to sit down for this." Turns out Chad wasn't just some random rebound. He was already under investigation for fraud, wiretapping, and involvement in a larger financial crime ring operating across state lines. And the worst part? Jessica's name had come up more than once. I didn't tell the agent everything right away. I wanted to hear more, wanted to know just how deep the betrayal ran. But inside, I already knew. Jessica wasn't some innocent caught up in a mess. She was the mess. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of Matt's guest room, piecing together every lie she ever told me, the late nights at work, the girls' trips, the dead phone battery, all of it. The signs were always there. I was just too stupid, or maybe too loyal, to see them. And now she was probably curled up next to that criminal, thinking she'd won. But the next morning was when it all started to unravel. At 7:42 a.m., Jessica's phone rang while she was sipping her overpriced almond milk latte in our kitchen, the same kitchen I installed by hand. "Hello?" she answered. "This is Agent Grant. We need you to come in for questioning." Jessica's smirk cracked. I imagined the coffee cup shaking in her hand. Maybe Chad was in the shower, humming some douchy pop song. "Is this a joke?" she asked, voice rising. "No, ma'am. It's very real. We're also issuing a warrant for Mr. Whitaker's arrest. We have reason to believe you were complicit in identity theft and laundering." Click. That's when the fear hit her. You see, Jessica never once asked who I really was. She married a high school football star who turned into a quiet insurance agent. That's all she ever thought I was. But behind that, I'd spent the last 12 years contracting with federal agencies on cybersecurity. I saw things. I learned things. I had access. And I had receipts. This story isn't about heartbreak, it's about betrayal. But more than that, this is a story about revenge, served cold and legal. Because Jessica thought she could ruin a man, replace him overnight, and laugh about it like some reality show villain. She didn't realize I had one more move, and the game had just begun. She always thought I was boring, predictable, safe. That was the biggest mistake she ever made. The moment I left, I activated the backup drive I had in my truck. Encrypted logs, screenshots, call recordings, even GPS data from the tracking app she accidentally gave permission to 6 months ago. I'd been watching things build for a while, too afraid to believe it, or maybe just waiting for her to show her teeth so I wouldn't have to doubt anymore. I watched her lie over and over. I watched her meet Chad at that sleazy motel on Jefferson Avenue. Watched her feed our son lies about yoga classes while she was out doing things I won't even say out loud. She thought she was clever. She thought deleting texts meant they were gone. But nothing is ever really gone. I emailed everything to Agent Grant before the sun even came up. By 9 a.m., Jessica's entire world was turning to ash. I heard from Matt, his sister still lived near our house. She saw 2 black SUVs pull up outside, while Chad was still in the driveway, shirtless, flexing his fake tan muscles like some bad soap opera extra. He didn't flex so hard when they cuffed him. He didn't smile when they opened his car trunk and found a burner laptop full of stolen identities. And Jessica? She tried to slam the door on the agents. My Jessica, the woman who once cried when a butterfly died on her windshield, now screaming at federal officers like a cornered animal. She didn't realize the surveillance camera I installed last year, ostensibly for porch pirates, had been recording everything, including her conversations with Chad about draining the retirement fund before I caught on. She called me 20 minutes later. I didn't answer. The voicemail was pure chaos, Nathan. What the hell is going on? They took Chad. They're saying crazy stuff about fraud, and you better not be behind this. Call me now. I played it twice, then deleted it. I'd already packed up everything I needed. Documents, clothes, the watch my father gave me, the hard drive with the last 10 years of our lives stored in folders labeled important and lies. I wasn't planning on ever walking into that house again. But before I left town, I had one last thing to do. I went to the bank. She didn't know I had changed the account access last month. I moved every cent from our joint account into a legal trust in Tyler's name. He didn't deserve to suffer for her filth. He was away on a school trip, thank God. He didn't need to see any of this. Not yet. Jessica's card declined an hour later at some overpriced brunch spot. She called again. Nathan, are you serious? What the hell is wrong with you? You can't just take everything. That's illegal. I laughed out loud in public. A real laugh. The first in a long time. Illegal? This woman let a criminal into my home, stole from me, betrayed me, mocked me, and now I'm the one breaking laws. She always underestimated me. Always. It was 3 p.m. when I got the next call from our lawyer. He told me she'd called him, screaming about emergency divorce filings and asset freezing. I told him calmly, let her file. I won't contest anything. In fact, she can keep the house. I don't want it anymore. He paused. You sure? She's going to need a place to serve her house arrest, right? Silence on the other end, then, well played, Nate. I drove to a cabin 2 hours outside the city. One I bought quietly 3 years ago as an investment. Jessica didn't even know it existed. It was peaceful, secluded, surrounded by pine trees and silence, the kind of place where a man can hear his own thoughts again. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the sun dip beneath the trees. That's when it really hit me. 18 years. 18 fucking years. And I still didn't know who that woman was. All the anniversaries, the holidays, the whispered promises in bed, lies. All of it. She probably never loved me. Maybe she did once, but somewhere along the line she started rehearsing her betrayal. I just didn't see the curtains fall. But it didn't matter anymore, because she smirked when she told me to leave. She laughed when she said, no divorce papers needed. And now she was facing 12 federal charges. No more smirks, just subpoenas, and I hadn't even gotten started yet. The silence in that cabin was healing. Not the kind of silence that comes after a fight, but the kind that follows war. The kind where you finally realize you survived something brutal, even if you're still bleeding inside. I didn't feel triumphant, not really. I wasn't some cold, calculated mastermind with no heart. I was a man who gave everything to a woman who didn't even flinch when she threw it all away. The next morning, I got a message from Tyler's school. His teacher said he'd heard something from one of the other kids, something about his mom being on the news. My stomach dropped. That wasn't how I wanted him to find out. I called him. Hey, Dad, he said, his voice small, cautious, like he was testing the water before jumping in. Hey, buddy, you okay? Why is Mom in trouble? I closed my eyes. There it was, the moment every father dreads. She made some really bad choices, Ty. Ones that hurt people. And now the police are looking into it. It has nothing to do with you, okay? He was quiet for a moment. Did she cheat on you? I almost choked. My 12-year-old son saying it so plainly, like it was just another piece of homework he didn't understand. Yeah, I said softly. She did. More silence. Are you mad? I was, I admitted. But now I'm just sad. For her, for me, for you. But we're going to be okay. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, can I stay with you when I get back? That broke me. Always, I whispered. By the time we ended the call, I realized something strange. I hadn't cried yet. Not once. Not even when I packed my life into 2 bags or heard her whispering sweet nothings to Chad while I pretended to be asleep 2 weeks earlier. I'd held it in, controlled it. But now, alone with the scent of pine and coffee in the air, I let go. I cried for the man I used to be, for the dreams that would never come true, for the family that was now a crime scene. Later that day, I got an email from Agent Grant. Chad had cracked, flipped like a cheap lawn chair. He gave up everything, his contacts, the fake companies, the offshore accounts. He even confessed to stealing some of my information while living under my roof. Jessica's name came up again, multiple times. They had a strong case now. Jessica was officially a co-conspirator. And I had one last move. I sent her a letter, not through email, not a text, but a real, old-school letter written in ink, folded neatly. All it said was, no divorce papers needed. Just stay. You'll be there a while. No signature, no threats. Just her own words, thrown back at her like a boomerang with razors. Matt called me that evening. He said the news had picked up the story. Jessica and Chad's faces were plastered on local TV. The report was vague but damning. Suburban couple under federal investigation for cybercrimes. The comments section online was brutal. Turns out, people aren't very forgiving of con artists who play house in someone else's life. Jessica tried calling again 7 times that day. I didn't answer. Didn't block her either. I let her scream into the void. That night, I opened an old photo album. We looked happy in those pictures. Real happy. Vacations, birthdays, even boring Tuesdays. I searched the smiles for signs of who she'd become, but I couldn't find them. Maybe she changed, or maybe she'd always been like that and just got tired of pretending. Either way, I finally saw it clearly. None of this was about me not being enough. It was about her never being anything real. She needed chaos. She fed on it. And when there was none, she created it. I was her stability, her cover story, her safety net. And when she no longer needed it, she lit the net on fire. But here's the thing about fires. Sometimes they clear the land for something new to grow. And I was already planting the seeds. The next time Jessica called, I let it ring until the voicemail picked up. Her voice was hoarse, shaky, desperation creeping in where arrogance used to live. Nathan, please, just call me. They're saying things I don't understand. I didn't know what Chad was doing, I swear. I didn't. You know me. This isn't fair. We can fix this. I need you. She paused, like she thought if she stayed silent long enough, I'd rush in to save her like I used to. Please. Click. That please meant nothing. Not after watching her unlock the front door for another man with her keys. Not after she laughed while that loser carried a bag into my bedroom. I knew the difference between a mistake and a plan. Jessica didn't trip and fall into someone else's arms. She built a whole life in the shadows while pretending to be my partner. And now, with the lights on, she was scrambling for cover. I forwarded that voicemail to Agent Grant. Let her pick apart the lies. I was done doing that. That night, I drove into town for dinner, the first time I'd left the cabin in days. I sat alone at a quiet booth in some roadside diner, steak and black coffee in front of me. A young waitress named Ashley took my order. She had kind eyes. I could tell she noticed I looked wrecked, but she didn't ask. She just brought my food, refilled my cup, and smiled like I wasn't made of broken glass. I appreciated that more than I expected. On the way back, my phone lit up with a text from Jessica. You're seriously going to throw away 18 years after everything? I stared at the screen. The woman had the audacity to act like I was the one throwing anything away, as if she hadn't bulldozed our marriage and danced on the ashes. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the email from the FBI again. They'd attached photos from the search of our house. Evidence, they said. I scrolled through them slowly. There was the guest bedroom drawer where Chad had stashed flash drives with stolen data. The hidden compartment in our basement. Jessica's handwriting on receipts and ledgers. The hidden burner phone under my side of the bed. That one stung, not because it was clever, but because it was cruel. She hid her lies in the one place I thought was still ours. But you know what? I didn't feel hate. Not anymore. Hate takes energy, and she didn't deserve that. She deserved consequences. And they were coming. The next day, Jessica's sister Brittany called me out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She always kept her distance, but this time she sounded frantic. Nathan, you need to know, Jessica's trying to say you set her up. That this is all some twisted revenge thing. She's telling the family you planted stuff to frame her. I actually laughed, for real. She's seriously saying I framed her for federal crimes? I know, it's insane, Brittany said, her voice dropping. But she's spiraling. She's blaming everyone but herself. Of course she was. That's what people like her do. They lie until the lies become truth in their heads. They rewrite the story so they're the victim, so they can live with themselves. Let her. Let her tell her version to whoever would listen. The FBI didn't work off gossip and crocodile tears. They had evidence. They had Chad. They had everything they needed. All I had to do was watch it all crumble. I hung up with Brittany and stared at the wall for a while. There was a framed photo on the cabin's shelf, something the previous owner left behind. It showed an old couple on the porch, smiling like the world never touched them. I wondered if I'd ever have that, if I'd ever trust again or love again, or even want to. But I knew one thing: I'd never let anyone make me feel invisible again. Jessica treated me like furniture, a placeholder, like the man who paid the bills, fixed the sink, and said I love you out of habit. She thought I was safe, predictable, powerless. But I was never powerless. I was just patient. The next few days were a blur of legal calls, texts I never responded to, and long hours spent just sitting in the quiet of the cabin, letting everything settle. Every time my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, my chest tightened, waiting for the next chapter of the mess that had become my life. But something changed. Somewhere between the shock of the betrayal and the frustration of trying to piece together what happened, I started feeling something else: clarity. Jessica had spent so long trying to rewrite the narrative, trying to make me out to be the villain in her story, that I'd almost lost sight of who I really was. I was the guy who worked hard every day, who showed up for his family, who supported her dreams even when she didn't have the decency to do the same. But now, with all her lies, all her deceit, I was done pretending that I didn't see what she had turned into. I'd let her tear me down for too long. I'd let her make me feel small, weak, like I was the problem in a marriage that had started to rot from the inside years ago. But the truth was simple: Jessica didn't care. She never did, not in the way that mattered. She cared about what I could give her: the status, the security, the illusion of a perfect life, while she went behind my back, living out her desires with anyone who would feed her ego. And the worst part? She thought I wouldn't find out, thought I was too stupid, too naive to put it all together. I wasn't, and I'd never be that man again. By the time the next phone call came, it was the one I had been expecting for days. "Agent Grant, I have some news," she said, her tone professional but carrying an edge of satisfaction. "We've got a court date scheduled. Chad's already agreed to a plea deal, and we're moving forward with charges against Jessica. The investigation on her accounts and activities is progressing faster than expected." I sat up straighter in my chair, hearing the word charges and not feeling the slightest ounce of guilt. "Good. Is there anything else I need to know?" "There's more," she said. "We've been able to trace some of the money that was moved around before and after the affair started. She wasn't just stealing from you, Nathan. She was laundering money through your accounts. There's no telling how deep she was involved, but it's serious." My mind raced. I had a sense of what was going on, but hearing it from someone else made it real. She had stolen from me. She'd been using me as a cover, and she thought she could just walk away from it all. I closed my eyes. The calm I'd been holding on to for days had finally started to crack, and I let myself feel something for the first time: anger. "Good luck with her," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But don't think for a second that she's going to get off easy. She's going to pay for this." The call ended, and I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just waiting for justice anymore. I wasn't waiting for the FBI to do the work for me. No, I was going to take control of the narrative. I was going to make sure she understood what it meant to betray me, to tear my life apart without a second thought. And the best part? I didn't need to lift a finger. I let her think she had won. Let her think she was going to walk out of this unscathed. Let her tell her lies and keep pretending that I was the one who was wrong. I didn't care anymore. But when the dust settled and she finally realized who I really was, she would be sorry. She'd finally understand the full weight of what she had done. By the time Tyler returned from his trip, everything would be different. He wouldn't have to live in the shadow of his mother's lies anymore. I wouldn't let him. I made a promise that day, to myself and to my son, that I wouldn't just survive this. I would rise above it, because I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Jessica, take that from me. The last time I saw her, when the agents came to arrest her, I stood in the doorway, watching her struggle in handcuffs, her eyes wild with panic. It wasn't satisfaction that I felt. It was relief. She was finally going to face the consequences, and I was free. Free from her lies, free from her betrayal, and free from the woman who never saw me for who I really was. She looked at me then, through the haze of fear, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of regret. But it was too late. I'd already left her behind. It wasn't until a few weeks later that the full scope of everything started to settle in. I stayed quiet for the most part, focusing on getting Tyler back into a routine. It wasn't easy. The change was massive. He had questions, of course, and I answered every one of them with a kind of honesty that was both painful and necessary. "She's never coming back, right?" he asked one night, sitting next to me on the couch, looking up at me with those deep eyes of his, so much like mine yet filled with a sadness I didn't know how to fix. I ruffled his hair, trying to smile, though I could feel the tightness in my chest. "No, buddy," I said softly. "She's not." We didn't talk about it much after that, but we both knew the silence wasn't because we didn't want to. It was because we were both still processing the devastation of what had happened. Life, however, had a funny way of pushing forward. I threw myself into work, into Tyler's school events, and into making sure he didn't feel alone in this mess. The days blurred together. Some were better than others, but every day felt like a fight to reclaim a life that was mine. The life that had been stolen, manipulated, and tossed aside. I watched the news coverage as Jessica's trial began. Her name, her face, plastered everywhere. She was the story now. Her tears, her apologies, her remorse for the things she'd done. But none of it was real. Not to me, not after everything. I couldn't bring myself to watch the live updates on TV. I couldn't stomach the sight of her still playing the victim, making people feel sorry for her. I didn't need that. What I needed was peace. What I needed was closure. And that's when I realized closure wasn't something she would ever give me. It wasn't something I could rely on her for. I had to give it to myself. The lawyers sent me the final paperwork a few days later. Divorce papers. She had signed them already. It was all over in the legal sense, but the emotional aftermath was much harder to clear away. But I knew one thing. Signing the papers wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning of me truly moving on. A couple of months passed. Tyler and I spent more time together. I enrolled him in a summer camp. We played basketball every weekend in the driveway. I even started picking up hobbies I'd left behind. I began rebuilding myself, piece by piece. But the hardest part wasn't learning to live without Jessica. It was learning to live for myself again. For years, I'd been someone else's partner, someone else's husband, someone else's caretaker. But I had forgotten how to be Nathan, the guy who was driven by his own purpose, his own passions. I started getting back into shape. I ran every morning. I ate better. I began reading books I'd set aside, and slowly I remembered what it felt like to want something more than just surviving. It wasn't about revenge. I'd already won that battle the moment I walked away. What I was reclaiming now was something more precious, my dignity, my self-respect, and my future. A few months later, I ran into Brittany, Jessica's sister, at the grocery store. I could tell she wanted to say something. She stood there for a moment, looking at me, shifting uncomfortably. Then she sighed. "Nathan, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but..." I looked at her. The weight of everything not quite so heavy anymore. "You don't need to apologize," I said quietly. "It's not your fault. It's just her." She nodded, looking relieved that I wasn't angry. "I didn't think you'd ever be okay with it, but you seem... better, stronger even." "I am," I said, and this time it felt true. "I am." It wasn't until later that evening, when I finally allowed myself to process everything that had happened, that I understood it all. Jessica had believed she could have it all. The life, the house, the family, the lover, the lies. She thought she could destroy everything I'd worked for without consequence. But she never counted on me. She never counted on me fighting back, not with anger or violence, but with my own strength. I wasn't broken. I wasn't a victim. I was free. And that was something she could never take away from me. As I sat back on the porch that evening, looking up at the stars, I knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever life threw my way from here on out, I could handle it. I was ready to face whatever came next because I had finally found peace, not in the way I expected, but in the way I deserved. And no one could take that from me, not even her. It wasn't long before things started feeling like they were really falling into place. I woke up every morning to the sound of birds outside, Tyler laughing downstairs while he worked on some school project. It felt like we were carving out a new life, and it was ours. I wasn't afraid anymore, not of the past, not of her. One evening, while we were having dinner, Tyler turned to me with a question that took me by surprise. "Dad," he said, his voice serious, "do you think we'll ever be a family again?" The question hit me harder than I expected, the weight of it, the hope in his voice. I took a deep breath, setting down my fork. "No, buddy, not the way it was. But we're still a family, you and me, always." He nodded, looking at me like he was searching for something in my eyes. Maybe he was looking for hope, or maybe he just wanted to know I was going to keep my word. "I know," he said quietly. "But you know, I'm okay. I think I'm going to be okay." Those words meant more to me than I could explain. Maybe Tyler understood something I hadn't realized yet, that healing doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to come all at once. It happens in bits and pieces, little by little, as you rebuild your life from the inside out. We were both healing in our own way, at our own pace. A few weeks later, I decided it was time to visit the place where we used to spend vacations, a small cabin by the lake, something Jessica and I had picked out years ago. It had been our secret hideaway, the place where everything seemed perfect. I hadn't been there since everything fell apart. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I knew I needed to face it. I needed to see it for what it was, a chapter that had ended, not a place where I'd go to try and fix what was broken. I drove there alone, the long road stretching out in front of me. As I approached the turnoff, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach, the one I'd carried for so long, but this time, it wasn't fear, it wasn't grief. It was the quiet recognition that I was no longer the man who had stood there with her all those years ago, hoping for things to turn out differently. I parked in front of the cabin, the sun beginning to dip below the trees. I stood outside for a long time, just taking it all in. The lake shimmered in the fading light, the same way it always had, but it didn't hold the same power over me anymore. It was just a place, just a memory. I walked up the porch steps, opened the door, and stepped inside. The old furniture was still there, the same patterns on the couch, the kitchen table where Jessica and I had sat countless times, laughing and talking about nothing. But now it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. Not me, not us. I walked through the house, room by room, letting the memories flood in. There were so many good times here, so many moments that had been real, but there were also the lies, the hidden parts of our lives that I hadn't been able to see. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was grateful, oddly enough. Grateful that I'd been given the strength to walk away. Grateful that I had Tyler and that we were rebuilding. Grateful that even in the face of everything, I hadn't lost myself. After a while, I sat on the front porch, just watching the sunset behind the trees. I knew it was time to leave this place behind. Not physically, I'd come back here when Tyler was ready. But emotionally, I'd already let it go. I stood up and locked the door for the last time. As I walked back to the truck, I realized I wasn't running away from anything anymore. I wasn't fleeing from the past or trying to hold on to what wasn't mine. I was moving forward, with confidence, with peace. The drive back home felt different this time. It felt like I was heading towards something new, something better, something that wasn't defined by her or by what we used to be. It was defined by what I wanted now, what we wanted. By the time I got home, the house felt more like mine than it ever had before. Not just the walls and the furniture, but everything inside of me. I felt like I belonged here, in this new life I was building. I felt grounded, whole, and I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the future, not of what might come next. Because I had already learned the hardest lesson, I could survive anything. I could rebuild, and no matter what, I would never again let anyone take away my peace. Not Jessica, not anyone. A few days after I returned home, something unexpected happened. I received a letter, neatly folded in an envelope with a legal seal. At first, I thought it might be more from the FBI or a notification about the trial. But when I opened it, I found that it was from Jessica's lawyer, requesting a meeting. I didn't even think twice before deciding to go. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to discuss, but I knew this meeting was inevitable. She probably thought there was still some chance to fix things, or perhaps she needed something from me. Whatever it was, I would handle it the same way I'd been handling everything else, calmly and with purpose. When I arrived at the lawyer's office, I was surprised to see that Jessica was actually there. She was sitting across from me, looking almost like a stranger. Gone was the smug arrogance. Gone were the attempts to manipulate. She looked tired, small, even vulnerable. "Nathan," she said quietly, her voice shaky, "I didn't expect to see you here." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a seat, my back straight, my posture confident. I was in control now. I wasn't the man who was clinging to memories of what had been. I wasn't the man she disrespected and betrayed. "Why are you here, Jessica?" I finally asked, my tone neutral but firm. "What's left to say?" She looked down at her hands, fidgeting. "I know I can't undo what happened," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I know I hurt you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." I let the words hang in the air for a moment, letting her feel the weight of what she had done, letting the silence stretch as she waited for me to respond. "Sorry," I repeated, my voice cold. "Sorry doesn't fix what you did. Sorry doesn't undo the years of lies, the manipulation, the betrayal." I saw her flinch at the words. Good, she should. She needed to feel the sting of the truth for once. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to... I don't know, make it right. I've lost everything, Nathan. Everything." I asked, my lips curling slightly. "What you've lost is nothing compared to what you've taken from me. You took my trust. You took my family. And now you've taken the only thing I had left, peace." Her face hardened, and she reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Please. I know I messed up, but we've been together so long. Doesn't that count for something? Doesn't our history mean anything to you?" I looked at her hand for a moment before slowly pulling back, shaking my head. "You used that history as a weapon, Jessica," I said, leaning forward slightly. "You used it to manipulate me, to keep me in line. You made me feel like I wasn't enough while all the while you were living another life." I stood up then, standing tall as I looked down at her. "You want to fix this? You want to make things right? It's too late. You don't get to just apologize and expect everything to magically fall into place. You destroyed me, and in doing so, you destroyed us." There was no anger in my voice, no venom, just clarity. I had finally let go of all the pain and resentment. I was no longer a man broken by her actions. I was a man who had rebuilt himself from the ground up, and I wasn't about to let her pull me back into the ruins. Jessica sat there for a moment, her eyes brimming with tears. She opened her mouth to say something but stopped. I wasn't sure if she was searching for words that might fix everything, or if she just didn't know what to say anymore. "You can go now," I said, turning toward the door. "We're done here." I walked out of the office, and when I got into my car, I took a deep breath. It was over. There was no more chasing ghosts, no more trying to make sense of what was broken. It was all behind me. The drive back home felt different now. I wasn't carrying the weight of betrayal with me anymore. The silence in the car wasn't heavy, it was freeing. I realized for the first time that everything I had been through had taught me the most important lesson of all. I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. When I got home, Tyler was there, sitting on the couch, flipping through the TV channels. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, I saw the same look in his eyes I had seen in mine just weeks ago: uncertainty, fear. But then, as I smiled at him, that fear faded. He knew we were going to be okay. I walked over and sat next to him, pulling him into a hug. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to bring some normalcy back into our routine. "It was all right. Mrs. Jenkins gave us cookies in class," he said, smiling faintly. I smiled back, the weight on my chest feeling lighter than it had in months. "That sounds pretty good, huh? How about we grab some ice cream later?" "Yeah," he said, his smile growing wider. "That sounds perfect." As we sat there together, I realized something important. No matter what had happened, no matter how much the world had tried to break me, I had Tyler, and I had my peace. That was more than enough. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need Jessica or anyone else to validate me. I was whole. And as long as I kept moving forward, I knew I would continue to be. The next few weeks passed slowly, but in a way that felt almost peaceful. My days were spent focusing on the things I had neglected for so long. I went back to the gym, started cooking meals again, and took long walks in the evenings when the weather was nice. It was like I was rediscovering the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. There was no rush, no pressure, just a steady rhythm of rebuilding. Tyler and I spent more time together than ever. We went on fishing trips, took weekend hikes, and I even got him into cooking. Every night we'd sit down at the kitchen table and talk. Sometimes it was about nothing, sometimes it was about everything. He'd tell me about his school friends, his latest video game obsession, and his frustrations with math homework. And every time, I'd listen, nod, offer advice when I could, and remind him that I was there for him, always. And then, one afternoon, I got a call from the FBI. It was Agent Grant again, her voice calm and clear as always. "Nathan," she said, "I just wanted to update you on the case. We've got a solid conviction against Jessica. Chad's plea deal went through, and he's going to serve a long sentence. We've also managed to track down some of the money she moved around, and we've frozen all the assets tied to her fraud network." I sat in my chair, the sound of her words sinking in. There was no joy in hearing it. I wasn't celebrating her downfall, not really, but I was grateful for the closure, grateful to know that she wouldn't be able to ruin anyone else's life the way she had ruined mine. That chapter was finally closed. "I appreciate the update, Agent," I said, my voice steady. "I just want to move forward now, that's all." "We'll make sure she doesn't hurt anyone else," Agent Grant assured me. "She'll be held accountable. But Nathan, I just want to say this. You were right to trust your instincts. It's not easy to make a stand, especially when someone you love is involved. You didn't give up, and that made all the difference." I didn't respond at first. There was nothing left to say. I hadn't made a stand for her. I had made a stand for myself and for Tyler, for us. After I hung up the phone, I went outside, breathing in the cool evening air. The weight of everything I had endured over the past few months was beginning to feel lighter. I realized that despite everything that had been taken from me, I still had so much more. I had my son, my health, my peace. I had my future. That night, Tyler and I sat on the porch eating ice cream as we watched the sunset behind the trees. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. As we talked about the upcoming school year, about his hopes for high school, I realized something that had been true all along. I wasn't defined by the mistakes of my past, and neither was he. "Dad," Tyler said, breaking the comfortable silence, "do you ever think about, the future?" I smiled, looking over at him. "I think about it all the time. But it's not about making everything perfect. It's about making it ours. Whatever comes, we'll face it together, and we'll make the most of it." He looked up at me with a thoughtful expression, then grinned. "Good. Because I don't know what the future holds, but I think we can handle it." "Right you are," I said, smiling back at him. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. And I had learned how to do that again. So we moved forward, not just because we had to, but because we could. The future was wide open, and this time, I was ready to face it. no longer shackled by the past or by the people who had tried to tear us down. Together, Tyler and I would take whatever came next, step by step, without fear, because in the end, that's all that mattered.